Today on the show, baseball is not politics, as if that needed explaining.
Welcome to the future, where the glass is half full and you'll need new glasses, where you'll be jumping from conclusions.
The past is annulled, and a new future is born.
Never before in history has so much meant so little to so many. AD on the radio.
So do you know what's so awesome about being a fan? Do you know what's so incredible and beautiful and perfect about being a fan, especially as you're an adult? Doesn't matter if you're a fan of a baseball team, a football team, maybe it's your favorite band, maybe it's your favorite television show, whatever the case may be. What's awesome about being a fan is that it doesn't have to make sense. There doesn't have to be a basis in logic for you to be a fan of something. There's not an if-then contingency for being a fan. And as an adult, boy, is that valuable. Because you'll find as you make your way in the world and you get mired down in the day-to-day drudgery that is adulthood, a lot of the magic goes away. A lot of the sparkle goes away. And you're forced to think logically. You lose that childlike wonder that made the world so interesting and challenging and fun as a kid. That childlike wonder that could make you excited beyond belief over an ice cream cone. Or a man in a costume that looked like an anthropomorphic mouse come to life in front of you when you went to a theme park. All these things stop being quite as exciting when you're an adult. But fandom is something that you can carry with you forever. And it makes no sense. A lot of the time. I mean, a lot of the time, you come from this town, that baseball or football team is from this town, so therefore it makes perfect sense that you're a diehard Cubs, Bulls, Bears fan, or Astros, Rockets fan, or Astros, Rockets, Texans fan. Although that gets a little bit dicey because, Texans haven't been around that long. There's a lot of people that are loyal to the soil that became fans of that other Texas football team during the period where there were no Oilers and before the Houston Texans got here. But I digress. Being a fan, you don't have to really bother yourself with the encumbrance of logic. I'll give you a perfect example. I was talking to one of the 25 to 30 or so bosses that I answer to on a regular basis, Justin King, who's a program director of KPRC in Houston, the station that this show airs on in the great state of Texas. And we were talking about whatever the hell it is we had to talk about. And he was like, oh, man, Dodgers are up by 5. I was like, well, you're an Astros fan. What do you care? What's big whoop? And he's like, no, you don't understand. My wife is a huge Dodger fan, and it was a civil war in my house this time last year, and I just, no. I don't want to have to go through that again. And I was like, really? How is it that your wife living in Texas, being where she's from, which is, it's Wyoming, right? How is this a thing? How is she a Dodger fan? And he was like, well, look, they don't have sports teams in Wyoming. So you kind of get the opportunity to pick one from anywhere. And her father was a huge Giants fan. And as a rebellious child, she wanted to do whatever her dad's polar opposite was in the world of fandom. And if your dad's a Giants fan and you are looking to exercise a little youthful rebellion with the baseball team that you root for, the natural choice would be the Dodgers. So because she came from Cheyenne, Wyoming, there you have it. My wife is a Dodger fan. Because she came from Cheyenne, Wyoming and wanted to give her dad a hard way to go, she's a Dodger fan. Which, look, makes no sense. Because really, if she should be rooting for anyone, she should be rooting for my New York Mets. And you know how I know this? Because Brandon Nimmo, our star outfielder, he's not a rookie, but he came up from the minors last year. And man, is he had a breakout season this year. Brandon Nimmo on the New York Mets is just unbelievably stellar. An on-base machine. Doesn't matter how he gets there, whether he's got to get hit by a pitch or whether he hits one of those doubles, which he stretches out into a triple because he's just that freaking fast and speedy around the bases. Brandon Nimmo is the guy, and you know where Brandon Nimmo happens to be from? Cheyenne, Wyoming. Same place as Justin King's wife, Tiffany. Now, this is even more impressive because, well, Brandon Nimmo hails from a town where there isn't a professional baseball team. In fact, he didn't even have a high school team to play on. So this speaks to this young man's level of tenacity and determination. He was a first-round draft pick. And he works hard. He works hard. He grafts. He grinds. He does everything he can to cause chaos getting on the bases. He does everything he can to put his team in a position to win. And he is truly a team player. He's the Guy Smiley of professional baseball. Always grinning. Always happy to be there. He had his season cut short. Not that short because there was only one game left to play, but he hit a single, which probably could have been a double with the way he moves, but he pulled a hammy, rounding first, and just had to hold up. And he does this sort of thing where he's extremely Christian, and he gives thanks to God every single time he gets on base by pointing upwards and acknowledging his creator. And as they were carting him off the field after he pulled his hamstring, ending his season, he still, as he was being carried, as he was limping, because he'd gotten a single, because he'd gotten on base, he lifted his eyes to the sky and he pointed up to thank his creator for the opportunity to play professional baseball and the opportunity to get on base and the opportunity to put his team in a position to win, which he then did. Or which they then did, rather. So if anyone from Cheyenne, Wyoming is going to be a fan of any particular baseball team, they should root for their boy, Brandon Nimmo, on the New York Mets. There, I've said it. But here's the beautiful thing, like you and I were talking about. The wonderful thing about sports, the wonderful thing about being a fan, period, in general, is that you don't have to justify it. You just feel it. You have this loyalty to a team that is privately owned by a bunch of billionaires that don't know who you are and don't care what you think. A team that is played on by people that are not from the town that the team is in. And yet we live and die by this. I have been moved to tears so many times this season by my New York Mets. But it's being a fan, and it doesn't have to make sense. It doesn't have to make sense. It's a wonderful, beautiful thing. Politics, on the other hand, it's not the same as being a sports freaking fan. And that's a distinction people have lost sight of. We'll talk about how I know this next.
Real radio.
104.1.
Where the left and right come together for fundamental truths. AD on the radio, on Twitter at ADSXE.
So as you and I were saying, being a fan is an incredible thing because it's the exact opposite. It's the exact opposite of pretty much everything else in this world. In that, everything else in this world becomes less magical, less meaningful, less sparkly as you get older, as you get weighed down by the encumbrances of daily life as an adult, all the things that used to make you wide-eyed and full of wonder as a child. Go away, become less special. You don't get excited over that anthropomorphic mouse at a theme park, which is really just an adult dressed as the mouse. Eating ice cream, that's something your doctor tells you need to stop doing or you're gonna die. It's not a special treat that makes you jump up and down and feel loved. As logic creeps into your everyday life, as you start to become responsible for maybe another human life, you have a kid or something like that, everything else becomes slightly less magical. But being a fan, well, that somehow gets that much more magical because your fandom is something that you pay for in years. Every win seems to matter more if your team has been a losing team for a while. As a fan of the New York Mets, I know a thing or two about this. I'll give you another perfect example. David Wright of the New York Mets. Not from New York, from Virginia. But you know what? He came up in the New York Mets farm system. And he played every single game of professional baseball that he played as one of our New York Mets, or in the New York Mets system somewhere. And the guy is going to be just fine. Now, sadly, he had spinal stenosis, which has cut his professional baseball career short. But he had an incredible run. Got to hit a home run in the World Series. Physically, he just can't play baseball anymore. But you know what? He's got to get paid the rest of his $27 million salary that he's got left on his contract, I think. He's got to be just fine. But it doesn't matter. Every time that guy would get a hit since he started having his spinal troubles, I'd be moved to tears. He would show up at the park hours early to do the special stretching routine necessary for him to get on the field and play. And I don't know what it was that I was working through in my life that made me care about this guy so much. I mean, obviously he was one of my beloved New York Mets, and that really, really mattered. Obviously he was a great guy. Obviously he was a guy that a gentleman like Brandon Nimmo learned a lot from when it came to attitude and gratitude and passion and hard work and hustle. An incredible role model. So maybe that's what I liked about him. Maybe it's the fact that he always seemed to be smiling. Maybe it's the fact that he seemed to be truly grateful to be doing what he was doing. Maybe it's the fact that growing up in Virginia, he was a fan of the Mets farm system. And he grew up going to their minor league games, then playing for that minor league team, then came up in the minor league system, and then became the team captain of the New York Mets, went all the way to the World Series where he hit a home run. I don't know what it is, but every time that guy got a base hit for the last several seasons, even though he's been out for a couple seasons before he retired, I'd cry. He worked so hard. He's such a good guy. He deserves this. He's made millions upon millions upon millions. You know, deservedly so. That's what the market would support, paying David Wright millions, so that's what he got. And he has to hang up his baseball career a little bit early, but he's got to make $27 million. But still, as I watched his final game at Citi Field, tears streamed down my face. Not many people get a chance to say goodbye and say thank you the way he did to a team that's been everything to him. And I know that if I was sobbing uncontrollably while I was watching him come up to take his final at bat, then I knew that sold out house of over 40,000 people in New York at Citi Field, I knew there wasn't a dry eye there. And again, you apply logic and reason to it. There's this professional baseball player. He plays for a team that's owned by people that don't really care what you think. Everybody that plays on the team isn't from the town that you're in, so you get this weird sense of local pride that really isn't justifiable. Whatever. You don't need to be logical when it comes to being a fan. And that's a great thing. And that's why I think fandom, as you get older, becomes that much more important. Everything else gets less magical. That kind of fandom, especially if you've watched your team lose for years and years and years, becomes that much more important. It was a beautiful thing about our Houston Astros. By the way, in case you're wondering where my baseball allegiances lie, it goes Mets. Mets will always have my heart. But I love the Houston Astros. I mean, how can you not love the Houston Astros? And you know what? That's a weird thing. This is the attitude of a fan. I don't understand how anyone couldn't get excited when the New York Mets win. I don't understand how anyone couldn't get excited when the Astros win. When I first moved to Houston 15 or so years ago, I remember going, all right, let's see what the local team is all about. I was like, oh, well, like my Mets, they seem to wear a lot of orange. They became a baseball team in the same year. That's kind of cool. And then I was watching sports on TV when I first moved to Houston, Texas. And I kid you not, the actual line that the sportscaster used was, and in sports, the Astros find a new way to lose. And I was like, I can relate to this. Being a Mets fan, I can relate to this very, very strongly. So I guess this is all just a way of talking about baseball, which I love. And if you love baseball too, you probably had a great time. And if not, well, you'll excuse me this minor indulgence. But being a fan, whether it's of a band or a sports team or whatever the hell it is you happen to be a fan of, is this die-hard, emotionally connected feeling that has nothing to do with logic and reason. And it's a beautiful break from logic and reason that we are forced to deal with more and more every single day we make our way in the adult world. But the weird ass thing is, for me, watching the world around me unfold as it has been for the last couple of years, is that people seem to have conflated fandom and politics. What's the old Mark Twain quote? Being a patriot is supporting your country 100% of the time, and your government when it deserves it. Or something along those lines. I paraphrase, of course. But I feel as though somewhere along the way, we, the people, have gotten those two concepts muddled. Patriotism is supporting your country 100% of the time and your government when they deserve it. But I feel like people are more into swearing an allegiance to a particular political party in 2018 than they are swearing allegiance to a flag and to the republic for which it stands. People are a lot more interested in their guy or girl winning. People are a lot more interested in victory and being able to shove it into the opposing team's faces. People are a lot more interested in winning at any cost because, man, we've lost for a while now and we deserve to win. We freaking deserve it. And you know what? Unlike that sports team, these folks do have a responsibility to us. I know it doesn't feel like it 9 days out of 10, but guess what? All that hard work you do that earns all that money that Uncle Scam takes a massive hunk out of, that tax money, that's what's paying their salary. I can't think of another instance where the person who cuts the check has to wait for an audience with the person that they're paying. It's a very strange boss-subordinate situation. If one of my bosses calls me and says, I want to talk to you at 5 o'clock, I'm going to be there at 5 o'clock. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Because that's my boss. They're the people responsible for my paycheck. So that's my livelihood. I'm going to hop to it. We don't have that ability with the people that work for us based on what we pay them out of our tax dollars. And the politicians that we have hired to speak and advocate for us. But boy, do we seem to have become their mind-numbing, sycophantic fans with a quickness. Absolutely overlooking what's good for America.
For more stimulation and less irritation, 9 out of 10 doctors choose KPRC AM 950, Houston's more stimulating talk radio.
Don't get the blues, get all the news. We mean all of you guys out there in Radio Land. All aboard!
He's back. AD on the radio.
Give it up, yeah. Give it up, yeah. Bring this on, come on, come on.
So, you and I were supposed to talk about news and politics and the world around us, and you know what? We didn't. For the most part, we wound up talking about baseball. Here's the thing, though. If you're like me, if you're a massive baseball fan, well, let me ask you this. What would you rather talk about, baseball or politicians? Yeah, I know. Me too. That's where you and I are the same. And if you're not a baseball fan, you'll forgive us this indulgence. But we are going somewhere with this. And that is, in a weird twist of fate, we seem to have conflated fandom with our political process in these United States of America, and it's damaged our patriotism. Only because, well, look, as we were saying earlier, Mark Twain said something to the effect of patriotism is supporting your country all the time and your government when they deserve it, or your politicians when they deserve it. Something to that effect. And we seem to have flipped that time-honored expression on its head. And look, of course, that this whole time we haven't been talking about baseball. We've been talking about Kavanaugh and the situation around him. But patriotism is about supporting your country, wanting what's best for your country 100% of the time. And we seem, on both sides, and looking at everyone in this situation, we seem only too happy to tear the country further and further apart, to widen the gap of understanding, to widen the divide by pledging undying allegiance to politicians. And it's a weird ass thing because unlike these baseball players, we do pay their salaries. They should be accountable to us. And this is a man, Kavanaugh is a man who has been accused of some monumentally terrible things. He's a man who has worked hard for many, many years to become the man he is. He's a man who has done everything he possibly could to put himself in a position where he might wind up as part of the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, the highest court on the face of the freaking planet in many ways. And people don't seem to be all that interested in the truth. People seem to be tremendously interested in winning. This could be a good man's life that we're willing to destroy because the system doesn't afford him the protection that anyone else would get in this situation. His life's being torn apart. Now look, maybe he's a horrible, awful, I'm going to remove my thoughts and opinions and conjecture from this. Maybe he's a horrible, awful, terrible, egregious person that has done all these things. Let's assume for a second he's done everything that he has been accused of. Let's assume that for a second. We'd have to be sure, wouldn't we? I mean, these are horrible things. In the minds of so many, Kavanaugh is guilty of things that will destroy his life and his family's life forever. Before any kind of real results from any kind of real investigation have come back. Now, will this investigation turn up anything conclusive? I don't know. I don't think so. But it's the vulture-like feeding frenzy with which this country is willing to judge this man whose life could be ruined by these proceedings that has me a little aghast. And on the flip side of that, this is a man who's been accused of some very serious things. And there's so many people who are willing to go, this is nonsense. Look at him. There's no way he could have done these things. We want the political advantage. Oh man, if we get this guy in, we get him in for life. Again, this is a man who is on the verge of being appointed for the rest of his days on this planet to a position of tremendous power in the highest court in the world. His character or lack thereof will have a profound impact on the life of every single American. And for that reason, if there is concern that maybe this guy could have done some of this stuff which he's been accused of doing, do we not want to be thorough? Out of respect for our country, out of respect for our fellow Americans, out of respect for the flag and all that it stands for? Isn't it incredibly unpatriotic to want to do a rush job on something like this? Because it's going to give you an upper hand in some situations with regard to your political and sociological beliefs? Is it the right thing to do to put a guy in immediately when there's been these questions raised about who he is? Or is it better to examine the situation and know that you can get your guy in to a place where he can advocate for your values, your standards of human decency, your ethics, your morals, your beliefs? And he can do all of that with a clear conscience You can have a clear conscience about the whole thing. But no, it's not what America's doing right now. America sees a temporary, America's really very, that sort of cliche that people apply to millennials. Everybody wants it fast and everybody wants it now and nobody wants to work for it. The Kavanaugh situation's perfect example. There's obviously an election coming up and there's a power struggle, a heated death grip power struggle. But do we really think that anything's going to be that different? That we're really all going to go to hell in a handbasket if your guy does or does not make it? Depending on how you feel about Kavanaugh. No, stop. Take a beat. Take a breath. You want to do the right thing and you want to know that you did the right thing. You don't want to snipe at your neighbor for a temporary advantage that probably won't affect your day-to-day life. I don't think you do. If you are like me, you can't think of an instance where a politician made any kind of difference in the way your day laid out when you woke up in the morning. There's all this hope that maybe they will, but I have yet to run across that. The way your day goes, the way your life shakes out, has and always will be down to you. A temporary rush job to get a little bit of perceived power, which could wind up either destroying a good man's life or putting an undeserving person in a position of tremendous authority. Well, that doesn't do us any good. Like I said, there's a difference between being a fan and being a patriot.
Now, more AD on the radio.
I did some stuff this past weekend just gone by, and I'm not proud of it. And now I'm living with it. I'm still recovering from it. But I learned something about myself. I learned that I must make sure that I have grocery shopped effectively before the weekend kicks in. Because if you're like me, look, I know everybody's supposed to do errands on the weekend, but if you're like me and every other American I know about, you work really, really freaking hard. We're all working like 18 billion jobs a day. And for that reason, by the time we get to the weekend, our desire and energy level with regard to things like going grocery shopping or doing laundry or running errands or stuff like that, it's at an all-time low. So you wind up basically spending most of your weekend with your face down in the living room carpet. At least you do if you're me. That's how I tend to spend most of my weekends. And if I haven't shopped on Thursday or Friday and I don't have a fridge full of sensible selections for an adult male to make when it comes to deciding what to eat over the weekend, I'm going to do some unwise things. Now, I don't drink and I don't smoke pot, but this past weekend just gone by, I was like, wow, this is like a drunken stoner. This is what very drunk, very high, very stupid, very ill-advised people eat. And see, I was obsessed with watching the last couple games of the professional baseball season. If you don't have a team that is on their way to the playoffs. And, well, I ran out of food. But I wanted to eat. But I couldn't be bothered to go out and shop. Couldn't peel myself away from the television set or the aforementioned living room carpet. So I was like, I can whip up something creative. What's good while you're watching sports? I know, chips and dips. Don't have chips or dips. Got popcorn. Don't have butter for popcorn. Salty popcorn. That's no. Oh, I have hot sauce. Popcorn and hot sauce. Delicious. One of my favorite combos ever. But I still would need something to take the heat off. You can't really dip popcorn, but I found a way to give it a go. I was out of sour cream. So what I wound up doing was taking yogurt. This is incredibly ill-advised, by the way. Yogurt, and attempting to recreate that onion soup mix thing that we all grew up eating. If you had parents that raised you in the 80s and 90s, you have that bag of Lipton soup. What I really should have done was taken the bag of Lipton soup mix and made myself a bowl of soup. That would be a sensible thing to do. But no. I was like, I've got popcorn, I've got hot sauce, I've got a thing of yogurt, and I've got some Lipton soup mix. Cool. I'm making popcorn with hot sauce and yogurt dip. It wasn't good, and it wasn't good after the first bite. But I took a couple more to see if I could get used to it. I did not get used to it. It did not get any better. I ate all the popcorn. There was a lot of it. I ate most of the hot sauce. There was a lot of that. And I ate all of this revolting concoction that I came up with, which was Lipton's onion soup mix mixed with yogurt because I was out of sour cream. Because, unless you're having a party, who actually has a tub of sour cream around the house? Not me. Anyways, it was not good. I felt decidedly unwell after eating it, and I still feel unwell 2 days later. However, it was interesting to me because it reminded me of back in the day when I used to drink, when I used to do massive bong rips and look around for food. And it reminded me of this.
I love coming down here, man. We were here last night getting ready for the big show and everything else, and I ended up getting Wizard of Oz drunk last night, y'all. You ever get Wizard of Oz drunk? That's where you wake up the next morning and you look around the room and you go, and you were there, and you were there, and you were there. There's no place like home. I figured out last night I can tell how drunk I am by the place I choose to eat at 3 o'clock in the morning. You ever go to Jack in the Box at 3 a.m.? Get them tacos, 2 for $9 leg. You ever pick up them tacos at 3 o'clock in the afternoon? You're like, holy shit, I stuck that in my mouth. The IHOP has a test on the menu to see whether or not you screwed up. It's called Rudy Tooty Fresh and Fruity. Try to order that 3 a.m. Money.
The great cowboy Bill Martin and ordering food when you're drunk. All right, let's take a look at the events of today before I get out of here. Let's have a look at what's going on in the world with our segment, My Witness News, shall we? Kanye West. Oh, Kanye West has made all sorts of news. You know what? There's entire shows we can dedicate to some of the... He means well. He thinks he's doing something of value. He thinks he's just... But, one might want to fact check a little bit more before one starts talking about which amendment one is all about. But Kanye West, in addition to everything else that he did this past weekend just gone by, Kanye West changed his name to Ye. Or Ye? Is it Ye? I don't know. Is it Ye or Ye? Ye or Ye? I'm not sure. But I'm glad to know that I can now completely ignore Ye or Ye. Maybe both. Kanye West brought a homeless rapper into the studio after hearing him perform. To which Tretch from Naughty by Nature replied, I was just happy to be inside. Oh, man. Oh, did you see this? This is an interesting one. Did you see which game show had a marriage proposal on it recently? I gotta tell you, it's a little weird because if you're like me, you think this is probably the least romantic and definitely least sexy television game show you can think of. Unless, of course, you find Alex Trebek's mustache to be strangely attractive. Yeah, we are, of course, talking about Jeopardy! A Jeopardy contestant proposed to his girlfriend in the middle of the show. I'll take stupid moves you're going to regret for forever. For $1,000, Alex. Yeah. How'd it go? Well, I don't know what his girlfriend said after he proposed, but either way, it doesn't matter. Only because I think the proposal was invalidated because his girlfriend forgot to answer in the form of a question. So if you are like me, where you decide to eat has more to do with the food that you're going to be putting in your mouth than the sign on the building. That said, did you hear which restaurant might be about to lose a bunch of customers because of a potential name change? What are we talking about? Dunkin' Donuts. Yeah, Dunkin' Donuts, I guess, in an effort to appear more healthy and more viable moving forward, are rebranding themselves. They're dropping donuts. They're just calling themselves Dunkin'. And a lot of Dunkin' Donuts customers are unamused by this whole turn of events. Dunkin' Donuts customers aren't happy with Dunkin' Donuts' plan to drop donuts from their name. And in January, when the name change happens, apparently these customers are planning to protest. Now, we don't know exactly what form the protests are going to take, but, well, since they're Dunkin' Donuts customers, I'm pretty sure we can rule out marching. JWoww from the Jersey Shore. That was fascinating and interesting and relevant news. Who wrote this? JWoww from the Jersey Shore is getting divorced. Well, yeah. From what I understand, the signs were there. JWoww and her husband had been drunkenly passing out in separate beds for quite some time now. Aaron Judge. Man, as much as you might despise the Yankees, and who was it? It was Doug Stanhope. Doug Stanhope said that cheering for the New York Yankees is like going to a casino and cheering for the house. But as much as you might despise the New York Yankees, as many do, it's hard not to like Aaron Judge. So it's easy to understand that Aaron Judge has the most popular Major League Baseball jersey of 2018. Yes. Well, I, for one, think it's nice to hear about a Judge that people actually like. Brett Kavanaugh has gone on the record saying he will cooperate with an FBI investigation. But then, based on his stories of his college days, he always really did enjoy female booby inspectors. That is cheap. But what the hell do you expect? You're listening to the AD show. President Trump has gone on the record saying that he and Kim Jong-un have, and I quote, fallen in love. Can you blame him? I mean, have you seen Kim Jong? Guy's a total dreamboat. That is it for me. Thank you so much for hanging. Thank you for being a part of my radio family. As always, this time that you and I spend together, best part of my day every single day. I'll be back tomorrow. We'll do it all over again. Later.